Welcome back to Franchise Player, and today we're checking out some first-person shooters on the PS Vita, and by some, I mean all of them, because the PS Vita did not get a whole lot of first-person shooter action. Sony's previous handheld, the PSP, was a legendary system, but one thing that held it back was the lack of a second analog stick. And many people thought on the Vita that having that second analog stick would lead to some killer first-person shooters and just other great game experiences. But unfortunately, we did not get a ton of them. But sit back, relax. This is going to be a fun one. Today, we're checking out some PS Vita first-person shooters. First up here on this list of first-person shooters for the PS Vita, we have Killzone Mercenary. This game is regarded by many to be the best game on the PS Vita. Killzone Mercenary released here in North America back in September of 2013, and this is actually the highest rated game on the list that we're checking out today, and it got a 78 on Metacritic, which I think is a somewhat fair rating, but to be honest, in terms of first-person shooters, this game is quite a step above the competition, and I think a 78 compared to the rest of the shooters on the Vita is actually a little low. I think this game is definitely deserving of an 80 or above, considering the console quality graphics that you have on the handheld. Back when this game originally came out, IGN said that this was the best portable shooter ever made. And keep in mind, this was back when, in my opinion, IGN was a little more respectable than it is today. So a quote like that, I think definitely held some weight, and it truly was, at least at that point, back in 2013, really the best shooter ever made for a portable console. This game really felt like a PS3 quality level of game in your hand, which was, what Vita owners were really wanting at the time. And unfortunately, we didn't get a whole lot of other games that were held to this same standard. Aside from the graphics being incredible, especially for a PS Vita game, I will say the campaign is actually pretty decent. I beat the campaign for the first time back about, 5 or 6 years ago now, so it's been a while. But what I really liked about it, especially it being a fairly short campaign, which in my opinion is actually a pro for a handheld game, is the weapons actually had some weight to them. So if you're familiar with the Killzone games like Killzone 2 and 3 or Shadowfall on PS4, the Killzone weapons tend to sway a bit slower than other first-person shooters, which I think actually adds a nice feel to that game. So this game actually does feel like a Killzone game, which is pretty cool for it being on a handheld. Next up here, we're taking a look at a game that I think a lot of people don't realize actually had a Vita release, and that's Duke Nukem 3D Megaton Edition. I think most people are aware that Duke Nukem 3D is a fairly old title, originally released back in 1996, but it did get a release, at least here in North America, for the Vita and PS3 back in January of 2015. But the crazy part is, and I think a lot of people, like I said, aren't aware of this release on the Vita and PS3 due to the fact that this was delisted, I think within about a year of release on PSN due to some kind of copyright issues or something strange on the back end. So this did not have a long lifespan, and if you didn't purchase it back in the day on the PlayStation Store and have it in your download history, the only way you would be able to actually still get this game today is by having a modded PS Vita or modded PS3. The Duke Nukem series is a franchise that I'm not super familiar with. I didn't grow up with it. I have a super faint memory of me probably being maybe a few years old and seeing one of my older cousins play this on an N64, and that's pretty much it. But I will say playing this on Vita was a good time. I mean, it's definitely one of those games that's popular because it helped popularize, at least to the greater masses, the first-person shooter genre, especially on consoles. So I think it's really cool that this is kind of a piece of gaming history. And what I really enjoyed too, or at least would have enjoyed if I would have actually bought this back in the day when it came out, that it was a cross-buy and cross-play title on the Vita and PS3. That was a nice feature that I don't think was utilized to its full capacity due to the fact that Sony and PlayStation kind of gave up on the Vita so quick, but I'm a big fan of anything that was cross-buy and cross-play because it really incentivized you to, pick up your save when you're out and about on your Vita. Let's say you're on vacation and you're wanting to grind away on a save file that you have on your home console. Just a really cool feature that, didn't get enough use, so pretty awesome that it was here on Duke Nukem. Next up here, we have Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified, which released worldwide back in November of 2012. And this game is bittersweet in the sense that really cool we had a Call of Duty on PS Vita, But not so cool on the other end that this game really felt like a watered down version of the console version, and the developers clearly took a lot of shortcuts, and this game was not even half of what it could have or should have been. This game had a ton of hype behind it back in the day. This was the era of 7th gen Call of Duty. So you had, MW2, the original Black Ops, MW3, all of those legendary games. And this game had a lot to live up to and really fell flat. The graphics, as you can see, are pretty lackluster, especially compared to something like Killzone on Vita. And the game modes are also, fairly standard, but almost a short version of what they could have been. For example, the campaign does not have any checkpoints, which I know kind of sounds like a weird complaint, but with the way this campaign works, it's actually a huge pain in the ass. The multiplayer is okay. It pretty much is a bunch of smaller sized maps, considering the multiplayer matches are only 4v4. This did end up being the best-selling Vita game, at least here in North America, just because it had the Call of Duty brand name. And I think at the time, people were just fiending for a nice first-person shooter on the Vita, right? It's, with the dual analog sticks, especially compared to something like the PSP where there was only one analog stick, I think fans and just gamers in general were really expecting a brand new system that was going to make the most out of these analog sticks. And unfortunately, Black Ops definitely fell a bit short. I think the game is fun. I think the multiplayer is cool. But for example, as you can see right here, this is the Hostiles mode. And this is an all right mode, but I think pretty much everyone would have much rather had zombies, right? Treyarch is always known for having a pretty killer zombies mode, and zombies on the go in handheld would have been pretty sick at the time. One thing I will give this game some props on is the multiplayer is still active, and from what I've seen and games I've checked out on Vita, you can pretty much always find a lobby available in Team Deathmatch. So if you're itching to play your Vita online still, this is by far the best game to do it on. Next up here, we have Resistance Burning Skies, which came out for the Vita here in North America back in May of 2012. And I don't know what it is about this game, but I have started it a handful of times and just have never been able to finish it. I think this game, really stands up to the 60 it got on Metacritic. I think this game is just flat out okay at best. It's really nothing to write home about, in my opinion. Now, if you're a fan of the Resistance series, I know a lot of PlayStation users are, just because of the trilogy on the PS3, and then even the PSP release I think is fairly decent. This game might be worth checking out for you. It's not going to knock you off your feet, right? It's just a pretty bland, okay game in my opinion. I think it's a serviceable first-person shooter, especially if we're just comparing it to other Vita shooters, because there's not a heck of a lot of them out there. This game really is just another unfortunate case of what was done to a lot of Vita-only titles and Vita ports. Just kind of a half-given effort, it seems. This game really could have been so much better than it was. Like I said, if you're a Resistance fan, maybe give it a playthrough, but I think Killzone is definitely still the standout on Vita in terms of first-person shooters. But if you are itching just to, get another first-person shooter on your Vita, I think this is worth it. But like I said, don't expect anything too much out of it. And last, but probably least, to be honest, is Borderlands 2, which got ported to the Vita back in May of 2014. One thing I want to say before I start ripping into this game, which I'm sure most people already know why I'm going to, but I will say it's pretty cool that Borderlands 2 actually did get a port on Vita, regardless of how bad it is. It's still a game that you just don't really think of being on a handheld from that era. So I think it is cool. But outside of that, and just kind of the cool factor of playing Borderlands 2 on Vita, the performance of this game is awful. On my modded Vita 2000, I did a frame rate counter on this, and it was consistently in the low 20s or high teens. I'm not usually some dude who's like really tripping too hard off frames, to be honest, but this one is, I would say, borderline unacceptable for a release that was supposed to be this big. This is definitely the worst way to play Borderlands 2 by far. If you pretty much have any other way to play it, definitely play it on there, but I will say there is kind of a charm to playing it on Vita, even with the performance issues. I have played this a decent amount, especially on my 1000 back in the day, but outside of that, this did have a cross-save feature. So if you had this on your PS3, for example, you were able to transfer over that progress and then play on your Vita. So if you were a person who was maybe traveling a lot at the time or really just grinding on Borderlands, that was a dope feature that, you know, PS Vita and PS3 should have done on even more games, in my opinion. One thing to keep in mind is the online is technically still up for this game. Last time I checked, I couldn't find anybody else to play with, but if you have some buddies and you want to play some Borderlands 2 on Vita Online, this is one game where you can still do that. But yeah, that'll do it for today's video, guys. Let me know what you think of the first-person shooters that did make it on the Vita. I always wonder, you know, what other FPSs were maybe planned and were canceled or just never released. A ton of missed opportunity here, but at least we do have a handful of them that are decent and playable. So yeah, let me know if you think I missed any first-person shooters. I don't think I did, but as usual, appreciate you for watching, and we'll catch you soon with another video.